Hi there, I'm Jacob.
I'm Joe. We're now getting into the bit of our podcast where we actually jump into the flat Earth debate that I had. There are probably a couple things that I need to say right off the bat here. The first one is that I hope you enjoy all the flat earthers getting angry at me. That does happen very, very quickly. And we're going to be listening to the debate live in the studio together. So you will hear us at points laughing over the recording and things like that. And I thought I'd also summarize some of the stuff that we talk about in this episode, because we're kind of going like beat by beat, right? I guess listening to little chunks of it, talking about some of the stuff that came up in that bit of the conversation. A lot of the stuff in this episode, in the early bit especially, is kind of getting through the setup of the debate, right? Because it starts off as a debate about Einstein, basically, and Einstein's theories of relativity. Me basically trying to explain some aspects of those theories to them, but also trying to explain to them various kinds of experiments that have been done that try and confirm relativity. Because one of the things that they deny very early on is that there aren't any. One of the things they say very early on is that there aren't any. And then, you know, there's some finer points that come up about very general claims these flat earthers make about science, about like science is always in the business of discovering cause and effect relationships. And then in the kind of latter half of the episode, we get into the meat and potatoes of the debate, which will kind of carry us into the next episode, really, about their ideas about what the scientific method is. Because the claim that comes up is Einstein and kind of relativity and basically all that kind of theoretical physics stuff is bad science. Right?
Or not science at all.
Yeah, well, yeah, or pseudoscience. Yeah. Sometimes they say, right? So that this is really where this becomes the crux of the debate of what is science? What is the scientific method? Is there such a thing as the scientific method? Later on, we'll be kind of talking a bit more about this thing this is in a future episode, like the demarcation problem, but it's all kind of tied up with this question of what science is. And yeah, we really get into it because I disagree quite a lot with the flat earthers about this kind of stuff. But this is all the kind of stuff that we were saying, you know, in our kind of part 0 is part of the body of like philosophical assumptions that flat earthers and a lot actually of conspiracy theorists make, which typically aren't challenged, at least by these kind of like online debunking people and like the science communicators, but that we don't think conspiracy theorists should be allowed to get away with.
Yeah.
So we're here to challenge that kind of stuff. We'll discuss that in a bit more depth.
Enjoy.
Okay, so a little tiny bit of context before we begin listening to the actual debate. I jump in because they've been talking a little bit about physics and how much you get to learn about physics when you learn about flat Earth. And they've been talking about physics in the text chat a little bit as well. As we'll go on to see, they start talking about Einstein. The debate really it kicks off as a conversation about Einstein and his various theories, which I can sort of expound on a bit when the time comes, just enough that we can follow what's going on. But then the conversation kind of broadens, becomes much more general. Yeah, doesn't just end up being a really long conversation about Einstein. So yeah, I guess cool. we can start.
Yeah, Newton, Einstein, all sorts of different physics, sorts of different stuff.
Wait till you get your head around perspective. Yeah. Perspective's a good one.
Heretic, are you Einstein pilled?
No, I think Einstein's bullshit.
Why do you think Einstein's bullshit?
Because there's no experiment backing it, in spite of it being called science.
Holy fuck, dude! We got a pill for everything nowadays.
Yeah, there is. There's a pill. It's a pill for everything.
Are you, Thermo? Are you aware of what Tesla said about Einstein's relativity?
No, lay it on me.
Direct quote. Yeah, Tesla said that Einstein's relativity.
Just before you say that, based on the fact that you had to put so much emphasis on saying it was a direct quote, am I about to hear some kind of argument from authority?
From authority? No, you're going to hear what Tesla said about Einstein's relativity, like I said.
Lay it on me.
So when asked his opinion on his theory of relativity, Tesla said it was a mathematical garb which fascinates, dazzles, and makes people blind to the underlying errors. The theory is like a beggar clothed in purple, whom ignorant people take for a king.
Yeah, a lot of scientists at the time had that response to special relativity.
So good on them. It's not even fucking science. It is just mathematics, like the guy said.
I mean, the scientists at the time were also engaged in some pretty mathematically kind of heavy physics. Like, it's not like they were.
That's
particularly
okay.
scared of maths.
Yeah, it's okay to bring math into it, but when there's no experiment backing it and you call it science, that's just straight pseudoscience.
I'd rather be objective, 100%.
Literally.
Of the time,
So when all the people who work at, say, like CERN, you think those guys are all none of the experiments that they claim to take place there actually take place?
There aren't,
They buy-
there aren't
they
viable
buy
experiments.
the ones who know that it's bullshit, they get paid too much.
But there aren't viable experiments for Einstein.
At CERN, there are, all the time.
Well, what's the hypothesis for one of them?
Um,
And why weren't they in? And the point is too is that you're like all these contemporaries he had were denouncing him.
yeah,
you know.
big time.
Yeah. Well, what's the hypothesis from his actual paper?
Okay, so I've stopped it here. Have you got anything you want to jump in with straight away?
I didn't know whether it was worth talking about the argument from authority
Yeah.
thing. So so obviously the guy's about to hit you with the Tesla quote, and you preempt him. You say, because he put so much emphasis on it being a direct quote. Yeah, it's a direct quote, right? He's not paraphrasing. This isn't Tesla through his sort of misinterpreted flat Earth worldview. This is Tesla directly. And yeah, he's got some harsh things to say about Einstein's theories.
He does, yeah.
But before he hits you with the quote, you preempt him and you say, because he put that emphasis on, is it going to be an argument from authority? Is he just about to say, this guy who's well respected said this thing? So are you really going to say that he's wrong about it, sort of thing?
Yeah.
And he says, no, it's not an argument from authority. It's a direct quote.
Yeah, sure.
So I don't know why that means it can't be, but yeah.
Yeah, it's not. I'm just quoting them for no reason. But yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things that I want to say about that. So the argument from authority thing, I, generally speaking, don't think that this whole thing that people do online, where they throw the names of fallacies at each other to try and win debates, is a good strategy, right? No. But I use it anyway. And it's relevant for later on, because I think I accuse them for committing some other kind of fallacy later on. And for the listeners' purposes, I want it to be known that I went into this debate with an understanding of who I was going to be talking to, and to some extent, what's going on is that I'm trying to play their game, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense that for people who do put stock into argumentative fallacies, and I mean, most
fallacies are bad.
Yeah.
But
I mean, but there's definitely a measure of badness, I guess, for informal fallacies in discussion, right? No, they're informal fallacies, and yeah, I think you're right that you're in the kind of discussion area where those things get pointed out, and yeah, you're speaking their language, I guess.
Yeah.
Also, it is relevant to point out when something is a fallacy. You just don't win the argument with it, right?
Yeah,
that's the problem.
It's just a bit. I just tend to think it's a bit of a lazy way of having a conversation, to be honest.
Yeah.
But I just, it's that you'll see later on that they don't like me that much. So like, I felt okay being late. I felt okay being lazy about how I spoke to them a little bit. But the other thing as well is that, I mean, obviously, look, so like an argument from authority depends who you ask what that actually means. But in the broadest sense, the idea of using just appealing to an authority as an argument for some conclusion isn't always bad. Mm-hmm. But in this case, it is.
Well, yeah, it's not bad when the person's expertise gives you kind of reason for being justified in believing something, right?
Yeah.
So the classic example is like with doctors, right? That you don't need to do the blood test yourself to be justified in believing that you have some disorder based on a blood test that a doctor did and based on the testimony from the doctor, right? That's not a case of like argument.
Bad argument. Yeah,
bad.
Yeah, that seems like a good one, right? Yeah.
Whereas if the doctor didn't do a blood test and just said, like, I dreamt that you had this disorder, then you're not justified in the belief that you've formed.
Yeah, and to that end, I actually had a look at just some information about Tesla, right? So a lot of people will have heard of Tesla before. He's a famous kind of futurist type engineer, inventor man. There's a lot of actual disagreement about him online, and I think some of that is because of the fact that conspiracy theorists love him.
Yeah.
It's, as far as I can tell, and this is disputed by some people on the internet. Like I don't know, I'm not actually. I don't know if there are historians that study Tesla's life, right? There probably are some.
There almost certainly are.
But he's said to have some kind of hand in the invention of alternating current in like inventions to do with radio transmission and things like that. So like important stuff.
Yeah.
But it doesn't seem to me like he really is an appropriate authority to be appealing to when it comes to like cutting edge of theoretical physics, kind of at the time when he was working, right?
Yeah. And I mean, linking the quote back to what we were just saying about doctors, if the quote that the guy in the discussion was providing from Tesla actually gave a reason beyond just there's maths in it, for sort of disputing Einstein's theories, then it wouldn't really be a bad argument from authority, right?
Yeah. They just don't like mathematics for some reason. And the thing is, as well, is that as far as I can tell, Tesla wasn't really, so like I say, he wasn't working at the cutting edge of theoretical physics. He wasn't really working with any kind of like heavy duty mathematical physics, right? Like his papers and his articles and stuff like that talk about his inventions and show pictures and diagrams and things like that. But he wasn't working with the kind of best mathematical physics at the time, and he wasn't trained professionally as a scientist, which I don't think doesn't make him a bad scientist. But he just did lack the mathematical training, right? So and bear in mind as well is that I think that when special relativity and Einstein's kind of discoveries were all really kind of in the like zeitgeist of the science community, he was like in his 50s.
Yeah.
So he'd been working in people say that Einstein's discoveries were kind of revolutionary, and they were in many ways. He'd been working with a kind of background of, or intuitively at least, physical knowledge, which Einstein contradicted a lot of, right? And it's that kind of, I guess, culture shock for many scientists that would lead them to be really, really skeptical of Einstein's discoveries.
Yeah, which is precisely what made it revolutionary, right?
Yeah. It was not even unreasonable, right? I mean, someone comes along and says that kind of some of the foundations of the things that we thought about the physical world are like wrong, or at the very least incomplete. Yeah, there's good reason to be skeptical of that.
Absolutely.
Tesla, I don't think had good reason to be skeptical of it, because like this idea that it's just mathematics, like it's too much maths and that's bad. It's kind of silly. Like physicists these days realize that mathematics, you have to use complicated mathematics to describe the world. It's just
Well, and also, even if in the context of when he was around, even if the quote was then, maybe not the like worst thing to have said, right? Like maybe not the worst reasoning ever, right? If he's used to years and years and years, like decades of doing science without relying on these tools, and then someone turns up, starts using these kind of lesser used mathematical tools to start contradicting everything that you've believed previously, you might at that time say, well, maybe we shouldn't believe in all of this because it's like there's so much maths, right? There's not as many, like there's not really any empirical observations to be relying on to be proving this stuff. This isn't the way I've been doing science and all that kind of stuff. We've moved on a little bit since then. So bringing up the quote in the context of a conversation that happened in 2024, that's just beyond reasonable. Right?
It's really, it's a real bizarre move. Yeah. And I think what it is that conspiracy theorists, and it's not just flat Earth that love Tesla often. There's this whole theory which we've watched videos about. We won't talk about it in loads of detail, but if you want to go give it a Google, not so that you can believe it, but but just to see what the conspiracy theory is about. There's this conspiracy theory called electric universe, right, where the basic premise of it is that all kind of astrophysics and cosmology and stuff like that can be understood not in terms of the behavior of like gravitational interactions, which is how mainstream physics understands the large scale structure of things in the universe. It's to do with gravity, but it's to do with like electrical and magnetic interactions instead. And these people love Tesla because he worked on electricity and magnetism, and he did so in like a really kind of intuitive way, like I say, non-mathematical way. And I think that to some extent, so there's a kind of overlap in sometimes the subject matter, like they like electricity and magnetism. Tesla liked electricity and magnetism, so right. But there's also like a bit of a personality overlap, because I think Tesla was a bit of what's the word?
Well, you mentioned it previously. He's like an intuitive scientist, right? Like
yes, yeah.
Also, not necessarily trained he didn't have the kind of mathematical background.
Yeah, he's
using
like an
all the
outsider.
sophisticated mathematics.
That's kind of the word I was looking for.
Oh,
yeah,
okay, yeah. So
I mean, both
top,
of those things, though.
Yeah, so on top of that, he was also an outsider to the mainstream scientific community, even in the day. Yeah, so I mean, that is.
Yeah, so I think there's a bit of a.
There's a reason to put him on a pedestal then for these people who think of themselves as intuitive scientists who don't have sophisticated mathematical backgrounds and who feel that they're they are right, like outsiders from the scientific community. Like, I mean,
yeah. They identify with him, I think, as part of what's going on here.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense.
It does.
Right?
It does.
But yeah, insofar as the quote's relevance for not believing in Einstein's theories now, unclear as to why. Well, I mean, it's not unclear why it was brought up. It was brought up for the reasons that we just
said.
discussed.
Yeah. But they're bad reasons.
They are bad reasons, and they're not reasons to disbelieve Einstein's theories or his work. Yeah.
Point is that you're like, all these contemporaries he had were denouncing him.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah, well, what's the hypothesis from his actual paper?
The hypothesis from his actual paper, I guess it's the light postulate and the relativity postulate.
What is the hypothesis?
Those two things.
Can you tell me what the hypothesis is?
The light postulate and the relativity postulate are the two hypotheses he proposed.
All right, what's the dependent independent variable of each?
The dependent independent variable of each, then there isn't really one. There are lots of different experiments you could do.
It's not a fucking hypothesis then.
Yeah, that's an overly simplistic idea of what science is meant to be like. Yeah,
no.
Big time.
No, a scientific hypothesis is a cause and effect prediction, a supposition. This is going to affect that.
So
you don't have that. He doesn't have it.
Well, let's consider a different case of Isaac Newton's. I mean, like, you guys believe in like the first law of motion, right? I know you guys are flat earthers and you deny a lot of science or whatever, but first law of motion, the idea that an object put in motion will stay in motion, except if it's acted on by some kind of other force like friction or something like that, right? Do you guys kind of accept that or not?
Generally, yeah.
So
seems to hold true, yeah.
Imagine a scientist. Yeah, okay, cool. Well, I agree with you on that. Imagine a scientist proposes that in some kind of physics paper or whatever. There is no dependent and dependent variable in that case. It's just a hypothesis. Like, you could do certain kinds of experiments to test it. Then you would be able to define independent and dependent variables for like a particular experiment you're going to do. But that on its own, it's not like it's a hypothesis, right? It's just quite a bit more general than any particular experimental setup that you could devise to test it.
Okay.
Einstein's theories are quite similar to that. In fact, they're pretty similar to that.
I mean, this is a lot more words than a hypothesis would entail. If there was
Okay, we'll pause it on that stinker of a claim that he just made there. So look, I think there's a bit of elucidation that I need to kind of engage in here, because I'm talking a bit. This is where I start talking about Einstein's actual thoughts about things. So he asks me, what was his hypothesis from his actual paper, Einstein's hypothesis?
Yeah.
Einstein wrote many papers. But I took that, for some reason, I took that to mean his famous kind of like 1905 publication on special relativity, right? So special relativity, the really broad strokes of what special relativity is kind of Einstein's theory about how motion works when things get really, really close to the speed of light. I mean, it's how motion works all the time, but it starts to become like measurable when things are moving really quick, close to the speed of light, right? Now, there are these two postulates which I refuse to explain in the recording, but I'll explain for the listeners, which I claim are the hypotheses that Einstein had in his paper, right? So the first one was the light postulate, which is the claim that everyone has probably heard of before, which is that the speed of light is constant or kind of invariant across all inertial frames of reference. Now, it's to fully explain what that means, I have to kind of more fully explain what an inertial frame of reference is, but I can give you a kind of a vibe of it, right? Normally, when you measure the velocity of something, it will depend on your frame of reference, right? So if I'm stood here on the surface of the Earth and my feet are planted firmly on the ground, stationary with respect to the Earth, and someone flies off in a rocket and they've got a dog in the rocket with them, right? Then the dog, the speed of the dog, as I measure it, will be the same as the speed of the ship, the rocket ship, right? Because the dog is moving with the rocket ship. But someone inside the rocket ship measures the speed of the dog. The dog won't be moving, right? Or it will be moving very slowly. because it's in the ship with them, right? So the frame of reference stood here on the Earth versus the frame of reference of the rocket that's flying out away from the Earth. You measure the speed of the dog differently. Now,
I just had a question there.
Go on, yeah.
I was going to say, is it a common like example, like trope in physics to use like rockets and stuff?
Oh,
like
yeah,
that?
yeah, all the time.
Because you get that in philosophy all the time as well, right? Like when you're talking about defining things, chairs get brought up very quickly.
Yeah.
And they're like kind of, they're almost like...
What is a chair?
Yeah, exactly. Because everything you just said could be explained by something that's probably more familiar to people, like when people are on trains. Well, like when you're stood on a platform and you see someone on a train move past with the train, right?
Yeah,
like,
no, you're quite right.
Yeah.
That might arguably
dog on a rocket ship.
Arguably a better example, actually. The reason that I think people use rocket ships a lot now is just because they're really fast.
All right, yeah. That's a good point.
In Einstein's papers and explanations of things and articles, he did actually use trams and trains quite a lot because I suppose, writing in like the early 20th century in like Central Europe and stuff, the fastest things about are trams and trains, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, it's it happens on a train all the time, right? Like when you're on a train, the things in the train with you aren't moving relative to the frame of reference of you stood in that train. Whereas if you're on the side, like on a platform and you see the train zoom past, everything's obviously zooming past you, right?
Yeah.
Now, the speed of light is not like that. It's unintuitive, but that's the fact of the matter. That doesn't actually matter what frame of reference you're in. If you're on a train, on the platform, if you're in a rocket or whatever, if you measure the speed of light, it will be the same value. And that was one of the basic assumptions of Einstein's special relativity, right? At least the way that he kind of formulated the theory.
Yeah.
And then the second assumption is this assumption which says it's the relativity postulate, as I refer to it in the recording, which is the assumption that the laws of physics are the same in every inertial frame of reference. Now, the idea is just like, very broadly, throw a ball forward, right? And the trajectory of the ball is a parabola, right? Like it's a bendy line. It goes up and then falls down. The idea is if you're in a train and it's moving relative to a platform, and the train's not wobbling or accelerating or decelerating, right? It's perfectly constant velocity.
I was going to say, and it's not accelerating.
Precisely, Then if you throw a ball like that, the trajectory it traces out when you throw it will be exactly the same as the trajectory that someone else, if they're on the platform.
Yeah, if they're stationary, respective to the Earth,
and they throw the ball, the trajectories that the balls trace out in each frame will be exactly the same, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of the vibe. Now, Newton's first law is just this idea that anything that's set in motion stays in motion, and also anything that's not in motion stays not in motion, except if acted on by an external force. The basic point that I try and make here is that it's if he agrees with that and he thinks that that's like a good scientific hypothesis, then there's no reason to think that Einstein's hypotheses there aren't good scientific hypotheses, right?
Yeah, and I mean, even if he doesn't agree that Newton's first law of motion is a good hypothesis, he still generally accepts it as as good science, right? And so that's the point, is that he's the one forcing you into this position where for it to be good science, it requires a hypothesis, which already is like, I'm not sure why that needs to be formulated in that way, right?
No, nor me. And we'll get on to later on. I start giving like
examples where we might not have hypothesis-driven science. But this is the claim that he's making, is that like, look, Einstein's theories. He just keeps saying Einstein isn't good science, and Einstein's a person, right? So Einstein's theories are not good science because they're not hypothesis-driven, or there aren't hypotheses or whatever. That was the sort of claim that he's forcing you into accepting, and you're like running with him. You're going, okay, sure. You might think that these postulates that I've just told you that I mean, you didn't explain them, right? So it's unclear whether he knew what they were.
Yeah, he definitely doesn't.
But yeah, so you give these sort of postulates as examples of, well, these are assumptions that are made that are testable, right? And we can go away, we can do some experiments.
At least indirectly, right?
Yeah, indirectly, sure. And you're saying, look, you might not think that these are examples of good science or the good foundations of science, because they're not what you're calling a hypothesis. Here's this other area of science, well, that's closely related, like Newtonian, where you're saying, look, this first law of motion, do you accept this? Well, this is exactly the same kind of statement, kind of assumption. That there are many different things that we could do to indirectly confirm or falsify it, just like with the light postulate and the relativity postulate. But and you accept those, so why wouldn't you accept? So even if you don't want to get him to admit that he thinks that Newton's first law of motion is a good hypothesis, fine. Even if he denies that, if he accepts that it's good science, then all of a sudden his original point of it's not good science unless it's backed up by a hypothesis or starts with a hypothesis or whatever. I mean, he's contradicted himself in that.
Yeah, or at the very least, there's some tension there, something hypocritical going on. The other thing as well is that he says the whole thing about, what's the independent and dependent variable.
Yeah.
This is the kind of thing that they teach you about in like high school science and stuff. I mean, it depends how far you go, I suppose. But dependent variable in like an experiment, I guess, is a variable that you're kind of trying to measure. And then an independent variable is a variable that you, as a scientist in an experimental kind of setting in a laboratory or something, have power to control, to tweak.
Yeah. So the variable itself is sort of measurement that you can change.
Yeah, something you have
a value you can change.
Yeah, a value you can change. So an example that I've come up with before is, if you want to do some kind of, you're like a nutrition scientist and you want to do some kind of experiment about how calcium intake affects growth or bone density or whatever. Let's say height. Then you can tweak, as a scientist, you can tweak the amount of calcium that someone in your experiment has, right? By telling them what diet to eat.
Yeah.
And then or giving them like a supplement or something. And then you want to, so that's the independent variable that you've set.
You're tweaking
that you've set independently of other variables, right? You've just decided what value it is. And then there's the dependent variable, which is the thing that you're measuring at the end, which is the height, how much they grow if they're like a kid or something, how much they grow over the course of the experiment. Now, it's really not clear at all that the light postulate or relativity postulate are structured in that way, where there's like an independent variable and a dependent variable, and it explains what the relationship is between them.
Especially in its kind of more abstract form, right? Like when it's just stated as a general law. Like
yes, well, exactly. So
there's definitely not going to be specific variables.
I mean, the speed of light is constant across inertial frames, right? I mean, you could. Yeah, I mean, it's not clear that that's how it works. Certainly, the relativity postulate. I mean, what are the variables, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, even in the example that you just gave, which is a good way of highlighting the sort of simplified version of doing science that you get given, like at school, you can already tell that there are going to be other things that are changing, such that it's not like that even in the simple experiment that you've just given, that's still a simplified version of what that experiment would be. I mean, so in practice, of course, there are like a million different factors that contribute to someone's height, and also, in principle, if you're doing a good experiment, you try and control for those sorts of things, but often you can't. But you can't. Yeah, you wouldn't be able to control for everything, right?
But I mean, more generally, this. Again, Newton's first law: things that are in motion stay in motion, or things that aren't in motion stay not in motion, except when acted on by external force. What are the what's the dependent independent variable? Like he's just wrong. Like that's not how all science works.
Yeah. So it's not a good reason for refusing to accept like Einstein's sort of scientific work.
Yeah. Very, very bad. All right, so I guess should we continue? Yeah.
I mean, this is a lot more words than a hypothesis would entail. If there was a hypothesis supporting anything in general relativity, or especially the gravity aspect, then it would just be a brief statement, and it would be like, here it is. If this, then that, done. Bada bing.
You can look at Eddington's observations of lens around the sun, which is a prediction of general relativity.
Yeah, okay. So what's the hypothesis?
The hypothesis is, now you have to forgive me because I forget what the exact numbers are, but they had a hypothesis for when, so there were a kind of body of stars, like a cluster of stars or something like that, which when they, at the right time of day, go behind the sun, or the sun goes in front of them, or however you want to say it.
So what's the observed phenomenon? How about?
An angle of like a lensing angle, like in the same sense that like a glass lens will change the angle of like a beam refraction.
Of light.
Gravitational bodies, according to general relativity, is the prediction, will do the same thing to the light from objects behind those bodies.
In a sense, gravity refracts light.
Yeah, pretty much. It was literally called gravitational lensing, right? That's because it's like a lens.
Wasn't it Eddington that falsified his numbers to match Einstein's mathematics?
No, they had to do.
Yes.
No, they had to do the experiment a few times, but they did actually get the result. In the end.
I'm sure it was. It was Eddington that falsified his shit to match Einstein's.
Right, yeah. I mean, look. This is why the debate is completely unresolvable, right? Because obviously, every time that I come up with an experiment, you guys are just going to say the guy that did it live.
Well, if it's an experiment, there should be.
Okay. I'm going to pause it there. They started yelling at what I said, but look. So there's a little kind of science physicsy primer I've got to give. I think so. This guy that I'm talking to, the main one. Also takes issue not only with Einstein's work on special relativity, but on general relativity, right? Because he says a little bit earlier on that he thinks, because he's saying there's no experiments to back it up, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Especially the gravity aspect of it. The kind of relativistic description of gravity is given by the theory of general relativity, right? So I start talking about a kind of experiment, a famous experiment that confirmed general relativity early on in its history, which is this measurement by Eddington, which they at one point incorrectly think I'm saying Edison, like Thomas Edison, who invented the light bulb or whatever. Because then one guy is like, oh, but didn't he, like, I think this might be coming up in a second. He's like, didn't he steal the light bulb or whatever? And I'm like, no, it's a different guy. But
and he killed an elephant.
Is that true? Did Thomas Edison kill an elephant?
I think so, yeah.
What a bastard. But yeah, so there's this experiment, this guy Eddington, went out, I think they went to multiple places in the world, although I'm not actually completely sure about that. But they went out to go and observe this gravitational lensing effect, wherein, the sun or any kind of massive body, really, the effect is very general. If there's an object that emits light behind it and the light reaches us and we detect it in our telescopes and our eyeballs, the angle at which the light comes towards us it will kind of bend the light around it, right? And this is a prediction of general relativity. It's actually, I think it might technically be a prediction of Newtonian gravity as well, but the specific angle at which it's deflected is a prediction of special relativity, right?
General.
Of general relativity, yeah. And they went out and measured it. They measured this effect, and it is accepted these days as as just like one of the really early kind of and powerful confirmations of general relativity. I try and play their game a bit here, where the guy says, no, a scientific hypothesis has to be really simple and like it's an if-then statement. Bada bing.
Bada bing.
Bada bing. So I try and kind of frame it that way, but because it takes me like a little bit too long to explain what I'm talking about, they start interrupting me.
Yeah, sick.
Too many words. It's too many words.
Yeah, so and then obviously also it doesn't matter what you brought up anyway because it was all falsified.
Oh, for God's sake.
Just to confirm it. So I actually did look into the context of this, and it seems like it's to do with the fact that they had a lot of, basically there was just a lot of data, and and obviously the way you interpret data is like a feature of science.
Yeah, there are some choices you have to make sometimes.
You got it, yeah. And so the kind of best faith version of this charge or challenge is that there was some bias in the data that was selected.
Okay, yes.
So it wasn't that they just made up numbers. It was they collected a lot and they didn't include some of it, and they only include the bit that confirmed the theory, which in itself, by the way, I should be very clear, isn't accepted as being true now.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And the experiment's been repeated many times in the last 100 years, right? So it is now just an experiment that's like that can be done, right, with more sophisticated tools now than they had like 100 years ago. But the charge wasn't that the numbers were like the best faith version of the argument isn't that the numbers were just falsified. It was that they were biased in their selection of data.
Yeah, right.
Which is obviously still bad if that was true. But as I said, that's also
I was going to say
not something that's like accepted as being true nowadays.
Yeah, who knows
by
what
most
the evidence
people.
for that is? But I mean, there's a more general lesson here, I suppose, which is again, this is something that you kind of get used to thinking about in like kind of high school science and stuff like that. They do, to their credit, they do teach you about this kind of stuff. Sometimes you get anomalous data that you have to kind of ignore, whether or not they were being biased in there, which again, you said that people don't believe that anymore, that Eddington's experiment was biased in any way to try and like confirm Einstein's theories or whatever. It's entirely likely that they had anomalous data and had to get rid of it, right? Machines go wrong. There are many ways that experiments can go wrong.
They could go wrong. They could set the machines up wrong.
Yeah. Other environmental factors to do with the weather, doing astronomical observations, right, can make things go wrong. There's lots of things that can go wrong. And as far as I'm aware, Eddington's experiment did have to repeat it in order to kind of eventually confirm the result that Einstein's theory, I suppose, predicted. But that's a completely normal thing to do, right?
Yeah.
You don't get an experiment right every time the first time. Now, it's a different question if they did the experiment, 1,000 times and they didn't confirm it, but that's not what happened.
Well, and also if they did it like 1,000 times and it confirmed it once, you might think that one time it confirmed it was the anomalous result, right?
Yeah.
But the point being is that, if they did it a few times and it didn't confirm it, then they did it a few more times and it did confirm it. And then over the last 100 years, many have independently done the same thing and confirmed it. Then it's clear which of the two versions of the results are the anomalous ones, right?
Yeah, I suppose that in a way that the point that you've just made highlights a bit of a limitation of any of these kinds of debates, which is that, like, if I'm drawn into a conversation about a particular experiment, the ability to interpret what the results of an experiment mean for your theory, you have to kind of integrate knowledge about lots of other experiments as well. Like, it's kind of impossible to just appreciate the importance and meaning of a single experiment all on its own in isolation from other stuff. And these results, even if there were some anomalies and maybe they had to repeat it a couple times, because it's been robustly confirmed ever since, and other predictions of the theory have been robustly confirmed ever since, you kind of can circle back round and be like, okay, look, it seems like the results of this experiment probably they did confirm Einstein's predictions, right?
Yeah.
But you can't have that conversation with the flat earther because all of that background stuff they just will also completely deny, right?
Yeah, and also this kind of goes to, I guess, things I've heard from science denier types more generally. It's reported to be, and I'm sure it's been emphasized or over exaggerated by science deniers, but it's a problem that a lot of science nowadays is so specific that repeatability of results is actually becoming a bit of a problem, where a lot of science is being done, papers are being published, even in prestigious academic journals, and a lot of the results that they get in those papers are then not able to be confirmed by repeated experimentation, right? And science deniers more generally bring that up as a way of saying, no, look, it's a good scientific practice to be able to repeat this stuff. Like, if it's true, like if it's objectively true, then we should be able to do the experiment many times and get the same result. And it's just funny that on the one hand they want to say that lack of repeatability or whatever demonstrates bad science. But I'm going to ignore these instances where it has been repeated many times and in many different ways or whatever, many variations. And I'm for a different reason, I guess, gonna not believe that.
Yeah. That's a very specific kind of hypocrisy. Where to my knowledge, now I've not looked at loads of depth at this replication or repeatability crisis.
Sorry, that's replication.
Yeah. My understanding is that it kind of infects mostly social sciences, psychology, nutritional science, maybe, I don't know. Not so much like fundamental physics.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not like shitting on those disciplines. They're like, in many ways, those doing experiments in those fields is like way harder than doing a physics experiment, right?
I guess that's the point, right? Is that one of the differences between the different types of science is that their experimentation is going to be more at risk of replicating, right? Of being able to replicate it.
Of being difficult to replicate.
Exactly. So it's not like saying that it's worse science. The claim that you're making is just that there are some areas of science where replicating experiments is going to be harder than in other areas. Fundamental physics is one of the ones where you might expect it to be more objective. Therefore, be able to be replicated.
Certainly, easier to control the conditions of your experiments, right? Because there's like, they've got these big, massive, powerful machines that will like pick out the right particles to smash into each other. Then you smash them, and then you do it like 1 trillion times. And then the same thing happens every time, or at least like similar things happen every time. Whereas if you're doing experiments on like populations of human beings, it's really hard to get anything even close to that kind of repeatability and that kind of specificity. And
absolutely, and that's kind of the point, is that claim then, that's probably where the over-exaggeration comes in, right? Because they see that problem of replication in those areas of science and then just attribute it to science more broadly.
Yeah. I think there's a difficulty in them being able to pick out, like, basically they can't, they're really bad at parsing the information. They can't make those kind of like fine judgments about, this kind of replication crisis infects this bit of research, but not this bit. They just kind of go, like science as a whole, fuck that, just bin it. They mentioned, by the way, that there are no experiments confirming relativity, or I think he says confirming Einstein.
Confirming Einstein.
But there are, if you're talking about special relativity, which is kind of the theory you get when you have this light postulate and relativity postulate. Any experiment that goes on in any particle accelerator, such as at CERN, like the Large Hadron Collider and stuff like that, they are experiments that are being conducted with the kind of basic assumption in the background that special relativity is correct, right? And so any time that they make a prediction in those particle accelerators, which comes out to be correct, which happens a fucking lot, that is a confirmation of special relativity, right? You can't have superluminal messaging, right? Which is just a fancy bit of language for you can't have information or matter or things transferred between points faster at a speed that's faster than the speed of light, right? Which is a direct consequence of the light postulate. So yeah, they're completely wrong about that. There's billions of those experiments that happen every day or every minute or second or whatever, right?
Well, have you considered that that's because the people who know that that doesn't actually happen gets paid too much?
Yeah, I haven't considered that. I don't know if do these guys think that, like, you know, these professional scientists, these PhD students. I mean, I know a guy, right, who was I think started his PhD in physics and went to CERN recently, and he's going to be probably making like 20K.
Too much.
Like enough to completely sell out all of science.
Yeah, man.
For 20K.
Times
20K
are hard.
a year or something.
Times are hard.
Yeah.
So yeah, anyway, so the point being is that all of the discussion about experimentation to kind of confirm or like falsify or like deny the theories of Einstein, especially like special relativity, like you say in this case, is just wrong. Like, just because they're ignorant of the fact that these experiments take place, or, I mean, it goes beyond ignorance, right? Because they're aware that it's reported that these experiments take place, right? So they're not ignorant of the idea of CERN. Mm-hmm. They just think that there's like duplicity going on and people are lying about it.
Yeah. And also, like, the nature of the experiments are so kind of, you have to have such kind of specialized scientific knowledge to really understand what's going on in them. I mean, the reason that I didn't bring up CERN myself to them, well, I did.
You did,
briefly, but
yeah.
The reason I didn't talk about it in any depth, rather I talked about the gravitational lensing stuff. Just because I don't know that much about quantum field theory and shit like that, which is like the kind of theory you actually have to know about in order to understand what's going on in those experiments at a fine-grained level of detail.
Yeah. But you don't need to know it at the fine-grained level of detail to know that it. Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like
the journalists report on it. So,
yeah. Like, I remember doing A-level physics, and we learned about the kind of experiments that they do. In particle accelerators, like the one at CERN. Yeah, where they just like smash like subatomic particles into each other, and then see the effects in cloud chambers or whatever. After making predictions about what would happen when they smash them together and stuff like that. And yeah, like, I mean, we definitely didn't learn any, like, what was it, quantum field theory? At A-level physics.
Well, yeah, I mean, so it's merely one factor. They're bamboozled by the mathematics. The other factor is that they don't trust the journalists that are writing about the science. Which,
or the school teachers that are teaching
all
it.
The school teachers. Yeah, well, it's all part of some kind of vast conspiracy.
Or the students that have learned it from the school teachers who have taught it.
Yeah, and also the PhD students that have learned it from the school teachers and then gone and then seen it themselves, come back and not like.
Yeah, but they're getting the lucrative 20K, man.
Yeah. They're all the perks of like the canteen dinners in Geneva.
Yeah, and don't forget the celebrity status.
Yeah. The vistas.
That's
the
it.
The beautiful sights, I guess.
Isn't it underground?
It is, yeah. But you spend some time above ground. Physicists aren't mole men.
Some physicists.
Despite the appearance, yeah. Anyway, should we continue?
Yeah, sure.
Bro, you even took the light bulb from somebody else.
There should be a viable scientific hypothesis for it, which should just be a simple "if that, then this" statement. That's it.
That's quite an overly simplistic view.
No, dude, that's literally what a fucking scientific hypothesis is. If this, then that. According to the scientific method, man. It's an inquiry into a cause and effect.
Is this method in the room with us right now?
Do you know the scientific method?
Yeah.
There is no such thing as the scientific method.
You're going a little bit weird, dude. Yeah, there is such a thing as a scientific method.
Who's the science denier now?
Yeah, no kidding.
Just going to say that. Who's the science denier now, dude?
Yeah, you got it. Well,
how are we talking about science, but you don't know what the scientific method is? Do you know what?
There is no scientific method.
Yeah,
there is no the scientific method.
But yeah, now you're doing this. You're throwing out the scientific method, and many times you've piped up here. Okay, all right. You're supposed to be the science guy, and you keep throwing out what science even. It should be really fucking simple. I've just asked you over and over again, what's the hypothesis? And every time I ask you that, oh, it's not that simple. Oh, it's not that simple.
Oh no, I told you. I told
you. You think a proper scientist would respond that way? It would just be instant off the top of his head. Just be, here's what it is. Yeah, here's the hypothesis that I'm running here. It's just that simple.
I told you what it was.
No, you didn't. Boil it down.
The angle at which the light, if the object goes behind the sun, in this case the object is a star or something like that, then the light from that object will be lensed.
No, that's not
sense of the
viable
angle.
because it has to be a cause and effect supposition. So you saw
Why
an
does it have to be
effect in
cause and
nature.
effect? Says who,
Because that's
dude?
what
Says
the
who?
scientific
If-then
method
statements
tests. It
Says
tests.
who? Says who?
That's what.
That's how if-then statements work.
You want me to start fucking citing 5th grade citations for the scientific method for you? Let me just ask you this.
Yeah.
What's the first step of the scientific method? Do you know that?
So I need to respond.
Okay. I'll pause it there. It's about 2 minutes. Have you got anything you want to jump in with straight away?
Not straight away, like just the if-then stuff, the cause and effect stuff, the scientific method stuff, all the stuff really.
All the stuff. Yeah. So I mean, this is where the meat of the debate begins.
Yeah.
Right.
So if you followed us this far,
then
this is the start.
This is the beginning of the podcast. When we start arguing about scientific method and stuff like that. Now, again, you can hear me at the beginning of this clip that we just played, kind of again like trying to play their game, where he's like, "Oh, it needs to be a simple, quote unquote, if-then supposition." So I try and explain this whole gravitational lensing thing as an if-then statement, which I think I successfully did. But then he went, no, it's not right, man. It's got to be a cause and effect supposition.
Yeah. So we moved from if-then to cause and effect,
which is bizarre to me for many reasons. You might think that, science. I mean, one of the things that science is in the business of doing, for sure, is discovering causal relationships between things in the world. Right? Obviously, that's true. But is that the only thing science does? I kind of doubt it. Especially, it's not all that physics does. Now, some of that does turn on some kind of subtle questions about what causation actually means, about which there is lots and lots of disagreement in philosophy and in science, right? Because I think scientists are becoming more interested in this question of what causation actually means, like statisticians and stuff like that. But I'll go back to an example I gave earlier, right? So Newton's first law of motion, right? Like a paradigm kind of scientific hypothesis that anything that's in motion stays in motion, except if acted on by an external force. What's the causal effect there, right? There isn't one. Like, there just isn't one. It's a law. Sometimes physics is in the business of discovering laws of physics or laws of nature, you might refer to them as, usually as kind of pithy little statements or equations. I say pithy, then often not pithy.
Pithy for what they're expressing.
And they're written down in a pithy way. The notation is very pithy. But it's not clear to me that these things are causal, right? And I think that's quite a hefty assumption that they bring in there that I kind of disagree with. There are some other really obvious examples of statements or like things that you would think of as hypotheses in science that scientists do and should take really seriously, and that are well confirmed by empirical evidence and stuff like that, which don't follow this really strict understanding that they have, where the hypothesis has to be a kind of causal relationship between two variables, right? So here's one example. I hypothesize that the Earth is 4.8 billion years old. Is that a claim about the causal powers of Earth? I mean, maybe in some philosophy of science paper they might dig into it and think that try and give an explanation of age in terms of causation or something like that. That's like a really, I'm confused about how that would work. That's a really substantive philosophical thesis. I think that it's probably quite plausible that the hypotheses about the age of the Earth, and indeed the age of anything, the age of the universe or the age of some kind of biological species or something like that, is a hypothesis that isn't necessarily causal. Like, it's not directly causal. It certainly isn't a hypothesis about a direct relationship between two like variables that you might measure in an experiment, right?
Yeah, because you could maybe think that it's a conditional on like the circumstance in which you consider the Earth to have begun its existence, right? So if the Earth began its existence at this point, then the Earth is this many years. But even if you that's reaching. But even if you take that, that's still not causal in the way that you're talking about, right? Because it's not.
What are the two variables?
That's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah. It's not like kind of tracking this relationship, this causal relationship between two variables. It's a conditional statement on one feature or fact.
Yeah, sure. And you might also think that hypothesis, in conjunction with other kind of assumptions about the natural world and things like that, might kind of entail or suggest certain kinds of causal hypotheses, right? So you might think that, again, it's going to be difficult for me to try and explain this in terms of like relationships between dependent and independent variables, but you might think that, hypothesizing things about the age of the Earth, and then also extra kind of maybe understanding you have like a geologist has about how sediment is moved around on the surface of the Earth by water, and how it's deposited in different places at different times, might suggest to you some kind of if you went and carbon dated things, or there are other kinds of dating methods that go even older than carbon dating.
Radioactive ones.
Yeah, sure. That might suggest something like the rocks deep down in the Earth have some kind of causal property that means that if you perform these kinds of dating methods on them, then it would reveal that in fact, yes, they are very, very, very old. That is, it suggests that kind of maybe causal, additional causal hypothesis. Yeah. But that's not the same hypothesis, right? That's a test of it. And like I say, even then, it's going to be difficult to always explain that idea in terms of a relationship between a dependent and independent variable. You might think as well that the germ theory of disease is not a causal hypothesis about the relationship between a causal relationship between dependent and independent variables. The hypothesis just basically says that I suppose it is causal in the sense that part of the hypothesis is, so there are these tiny little microorganisms that exist like on our hands and on surfaces and shit like that, and that they go about causing diseases, instead of like miasmas or whatever like these weird gases and stuff that the ancients believed in. So there's causal content to it, but again, it's not like that on its own. That statement of the germ theory disease, which is vastly oversimplified, I suppose, is not on its own a statement about the causal relationship between dependent and independent variables. Now, again, it might suggest things about with other assumptions in the background about relationships between dependent and independent variables, such as if someone ingests a piece of food with a certain amount of germs on it, it might make them ill or something like that, right? Maybe you could try and figure out how that could be made into an experiment where there are clear dependent and independent variables to measure. But with those sets of examples I just gave, the point is that yes, so look, obviously causation is important in science. Those statements aren't obviously about causation between independent and dependent variables. They can be made to suggest or entail certain kinds of hypotheses about the relationships between variables, but so can the light postulate and the relativity postulate and Einstein's kind of equations that describe the curvature of space-time and general relativity and stuff like that. All of that stuff coupled with other assumptions about, for example, the structure of our solar system, where planets are in relative position to each other and things like that, might and do, and that's what the kind of gravitational lensing experiment thing, the observation was really about. That's why I was giving that as an example. Those things are that those things too can entail hypotheses about relationships between physical variables. So in that sense, there's really no difference between those two cases. If they think that the Einstein stuff is not good science because it's not causal or about dependent and independent variables or whatever, then all of that other stuff is like bullshit pseudoscience too, right?
That's wild though, because the examples that you gave were almost grist to the mill of a deep conspiracy theorist.
In what sense?
Well, because if you're a young Earth conspiracy theorist, then actually your first example of the age of the Earth's going to be blown out.
That's true.
And then all of the kind of COVID deniers and stuff are going to love to reject the
they've
germ
come for all of them.
So,
they've actually come for every single one of them.
Yeah,
I mean, look,
grist to your mill, man. Grist to your mill.
Yeah, I'm not here to I suppose, even though it's interesting to talk about what it is that we could say to these people, the point, I suppose, is not to try and convince them. It's for the audience that are
to realize that it might be the case that you realize that these conspiracy theorists are like kind of peddling.
They're off the deep end, like fully.
Yeah, and also peddling a load of like bullshit about like the facts behind, like the facts of the matter, right? Like, so you might not think that the Earth is flat. Good for you, excellent. But you might not realize that the arguments that are being made about it are already fucked up to begin with the reasoning and the assumptions that they're making. And if you don't know that much about science, which is understandable for people who, just go to school and learn the stuff that they're talking about, like you do learn the scientific method in the way that they like talk about a lot in this discussion. So if you learn all of that, you might still think that they're kind of having their discussion in like maybe not good faith, but like at least on the basis of like reasonable assumptions about what science is. And they're not.
Yeah, no, 100%.
So not only are they getting the facts wrong, but they're getting to those incorrect facts kind of wrongly with poor reasoning and based on bad assumptions.
Yeah, many layers of poor empirical reasoning, and then also like the poor philosophical methodologically kind of reasoning.
So if you're the sort of person that only ever did scientific experimentation at school where you did manipulate variables in this way that they're describing, and you assumed that even in the most kind of like specific and kind of sophisticated ways, like the experiments that scientists, like professional scientists, are doing at places like CERN, all follow that similar formula that you learn at school or wherever. Because we said like you can learn it through popular media and stuff as well, right? Like it is kind of popularized in many avenues in life. You're not gonna like, this is basically just a way for us to say like that's not actually the case. And so the reason why we support or at least like believe in the truth of like Einstein's theories and things like that isn't because it actually does follow the scientific method, right? The point that we're kind of making here though is that even if you agree in the most charitable way with some of the interpretations that are being made, then even it seems here that the flat earthers still need to accept it.
I mean, again, unless they're willing to
deny
literally
other
all that,
areas.
which as I said at the start, they may well be. It actually hadn't occurred to me that so like the vaccine denial thing is one thing, but there is actually a bit of a movement now to do virus denial. Have you seen that?
No, no, that's why
Did you know that?
No, that's why I said COVID specifically, because it was obviously huge during COVID, right? And there were many other reasons to be a conspiracy theorist during that time, but no, they've moved beyond just COVID specifically. Now there's no such thing as viruses.
Yeah, dude. There are people existing online. I don't think it's I don't know what percentage of the hardcore COVID conspiracy theorist people it is, but there is some kind of non-negligible contingent of people that are saying yes, viruses are fake, like across the board.
I mean, isn't it the case? Yeah, I mean, I was about to say actually that seems like a natural extension from the anti-COVID stuff. As soon as you realise that the flu jab that millions of people get every year is a vaccine.
Of a similar kind.
Kind, and that the actual virus is a similar virus. Then obviously, if you want to deny the one, then it's a natural extension to deny the other one.
And maybe the next step is denying the germ theory of disease.
Yeah, maybe
like, genuinely could be. Maybe they stop washing their hands, man. Because it's the germs aren't real. I can just like have fucking filthy hands.
Or at the very least, that washing the hands just clears away the miasma.
Yeah, true.
And not the germs.
The germs it rebalances your humours.
And I also wondered, so, I mean, they are just straight up wrong that some if-then statements do not denote cause and effect.
Oh, of course,
right. But more generally as well, it didn't seem obvious to me that what your if-then statement about gravitational lensing couldn't be seen as being causal either. Now, like, I mean, I'm definitely not a physicist, right? And I know that you might not want to be so strong in your assertion as to be saying, yes, it is a cause. So I appreciate why you didn't want to just respond and be like, yeah, look, you can just, it is cause and effect, right? The gravity of the star is causing the light the light to lens. But like, you could think of it, like, I mean, at least you could think of it like that, right? You don't necessarily want, like, if you want to get into the sort of larger discussion of what causation is or whatever, right? You might then, on some sort of, like, ways of interpreting the word causation. Yeah. You might want to be, okay, it's not really causing it, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, there are very, very broad ways. So this did occur to me actually when I've been re-listening to this. That I mean, look, there are some very you can interpret the word cause quite broadly. Yeah. Now so the way philosophers often think about causation is in terms of things like so there's a classic example of like billiard balls bashing into each other, right? Because I think it's David Hume's example. Where you're playing billiards or pool or snooker or whatever, and one ball bashes into another, like the cue ball bashes into one of the balls you're trying to pocket, and then it goes off into a pocket if you're good at pool. And that's the idea, is that the motion and collision of the cue ball, the first ball, causes the motion of the other ball, right? So they're two things bashing into each other, right? That's the kind of paradigm of causation. But the way that the word cause gets used in like ordinary language is quite a bit more broad than that. So one thing that you might think is like you might, if you agree with the flat earthers in this discussion, you might think that you might say something like this: you, Joe, think that Einstein's hypothesis is a good scientific hypothesis, but what are the dependent and independent variables? That causes a problem for you, right? Yeah. This is something someone might say is that, here's an argument you've not considered, and that causes a problem for your belief about something, right? Yeah. My point being is that this term of cause, this use of the word, the term cause, is not like talking about anything bashing into anything else, or even anything like physical, right? But is just the word cause being used like in a much more general way. So the point being, I think there definitely is a very general sense that you could think about the word cause, such that the the gravity of the star causes the light to bend around it. I think that's a perfectly reasonable thing to say. But they don't. I don't know why they don't think that. But
I was just really surprised. Like, because the thing is that I'm assuming that they're not going in with this really narrow, sophisticated kind of idea of causation, and that's the problem that they've got with your statement, right? So I'm just not sure why they didn't. I mean, I'm assuming it's just because they were in argumentative mode and they didn't want to listen to anything you said, right? But
I think that
the way
you
phrased your if then
I was
supposition,
trying to do what they wanted, right? I was trying to give them what they wanted.
You said something along the lines of if this was it the star.
Yeah, I said like if the object is between you and the light source, then it will bend the light around.
Yeah, then the light will lens or something like that. Is what you said, right? Which fantastic, and that perfectly could be natural language interpreted as saying
as causal.
And if they want their independent and dependent variables, right, like change the mass of the thing in between you and the light and the thing emitting the light, and see whether the lens in effect changes or whatever. And then you go, bada bing, the mass of the object is causing, and it's just weird that like even though you didn't necessarily want to be committed to any of these kind of stronger stronger statements of like, oh, this is to do with causation, but everything you said could be interpreted by them in the way that they're asking you to frame it, but they just throw it out the window. Like, no, it needs to be cause and effect.
Yeah, they're crazy uncharitable, like crazy. It's like crazy uncharitability going on in this conversation. But I think you're right. They're in argumentative mode. I mean, we're doing a bit of psychoanalysis on them now, but that's good. We can do that. Yeah. We can do that. They're in argumentative mode. I'm a globe head. They want to debunk me, so they're obviously they're not going to take anything I say seriously. And also like this guy's saying like it's too many words.
Too many words.
Too many words, man. I was saying too many words in his ears. He just can't listen to me for that long, I guess.
But it wasn't that many words either.
No, it wasn't.
It stood out to me as really bizarre because like I agree with you. Like obviously we definitely agree that science might not be just in the business of revealing cause and effect in the world, right? Whatever. You did a really good job, I think, of without preparation trying to reframe what you're saying in the way that they're demanding it of you. And you did it. And then they were like, no, that's not good enough. It needs to be cause and effect. And it's like, well, just re-listen to what I just said. You can think of that as cause and effect. You might be wrong. Cool. But like that wouldn't then be a reason for you to have a problem with it, right? Like at that stage, you would have to say, no, it doesn't, right? Like for them to be correct, that if good science has to be sort of put as these cause and effect suppositions, and you did that, you explained gravitational lensing, or you stated gravitational the feature phenomena of gravitational lensing in such a way that it does denote a cause and effect relation, that then they either have to admit it's good science or that doesn't happen. Which in a way they do both, because they say that Eddington made up his results and also that it's not good science. They covered both bases. They didn't need to do that, but they did.
Yeah,
that's good of them.
They're covering all of logical space. Yeah.
Let me just ask you this. What's the first step of the scientific method? Do you know that?
So I need to respond to a couple things that were said.
I'm not trying. This isn't a gotcha. I'm just asking you this. I'm just asking this just so that I can parse out the logic of what the scientific method does together with you.
The person a minute ago said that's how if-then statements work. No, it isn't. If-then statements don't always denote causal relationships. 2, I know that you think.
Okay, I know this is fucking irrelevant, man.
I know that you think.
First step of the scientific method, dude.
Yeah. I know that you think the first step is generate hypothesis or something like that.
You got it wrong.
What is it? What do you? I mean,
X, then Y.
I didn't get it wrong because there is no such thing. But tell me what you think it is.
Well, that's crazy. But observe a phenomenon. That's the first step.
Okay.
Then what you're going to do is formulate your hypothesis, which is going to be a cause and effect supposition about the phenomenon that was observed. So I think gravity caused the light to lens around the sun. Whatever it is that you want to suppose is the cause of whatever phenomenon that has been observed. Yeah. Simple enough. Are we tracking?
According to who is this? So according to who is this? How the science
my God, Mr. Science guy, educated academic dude, is now calling into question fifth grade knowledge of what the scientific method is.
Well, but this is the thing, right? Is that whenever I ask you guys for like sources about stuff, you always send me to like fifth grade textbooks that will lie to children.
Because that's how fucked up you are.
No. But you must understand that the scientific educational resources made for children simplify things for children, right? So it won't be the complete truth.
Dude, it's the same simple fucking thing. The method is just testing a cause and effect relationship. It always works this way. You observe a phenomenon, and then you vary and manipulate what you suppose to be the cause to understand whether or not it actually does affect the phenomenon. No. Okay.
I deny it. You affirm it. Make an argument or move on.
He denies science. How dare you?
You are a science denier. In your own words.
No, so the thing is that denying that there is such a thing as a single scientific method is not the same as denying that science.
You're just an idiot, dude. Give me the scientific method that has something other than a dependent, independent, and control variable.
I don't think there is a scientific method.
Hey, give me the one. Give me any of them that doesn't include those variables I just outlined.
Sometimes scientists.
How many scientific method you have?
Okay. So I'm about to make a point in response to them, so I thought I'd pause it and we'll talk about what's just been said. Okay, so like I said, this is the meat and potatoes of the actual debate. I claim that there is no such thing as a single scientific method. They claim that they have this very definitive kind of, I guess, step-like scientific method where there's a first step, which is what they say is make an observation.
Well done, you've learned your lesson.
Yeah, I got it wrong. And then it's to form some kind of hypothesis about the observation, I guess. Right, that's what they said.
And also, like, they're in agreement. It's not like they think that it's more sophisticated than the scientific method that you're taught at school, like the simplified version.
This is it,
right? Like they're happy to so they make the claim that do you need to go back and read these kind of like fifth grade textbooks, and then you go but like that you always send me this stuff about like you always like cite all this stuff that's taught to kids. Real science is quite a bit more complex than that, and they're happy to just go no, it's not. Right.
Well, the trick they always play is like but thing is, it's so foundational that they teach it to children, right? So if you get that wrong, then that means that you're like really wrong because you're an idiot, right?
That everything that you say from then is wrong because you're like on the wrong foundation.
You can't even understand what a child can understand, right? But the problem is that I mean, as I say in the recording, right? They have assumed that education is like works hierarchically, where when you're like 1 or something, you get taught the foundation of all scientific knowledge, and then as you go throughout your science education, you build it.
But it's always on those foundations.
Yeah, exactly, right, exactly. But the thing is, right, is that loads of people will have the experience of being told about, for example, the nature of atoms, where when you're really little, you learn that atoms are just like, I guess, like tiny little billiard balls, right? That bash into each other. When you grow up, you learn that when you grow up a bit, right? You learn that actually atoms have this kind of internal structure, and it's like an electron orbiting, almost like a solar system, orbiting a nucleus. Then eventually you graduate into doing you're at college or university or something like that, and you start learning that the structure of the atom is way more complicated than that, and that actually electrons don't really quite. It's not the same way that the Earth orbits the sun. The electron's more like a cloud that's like spread out in the atom itself. And the point I'm trying to make here is that this is an example of a bit of science education where early on in the education you get told an oversimplified truth, which actually later on gets revised quite heavily.
Well, and also if like in some instances you might not even want to say they're oversimplified truths. Like you might want to just say that actually they're like almost kind of like they're so simplified that if you take the statement as is, like literally, then it's false. But it serves as a good like kind of analogy or like metaphor for what is true.
And this is something about, again, like they're oversimplifying the concept of teaching. Teaching is not always about just delivering facts, but helping students think through things themselves.
Yeah, and create understanding.
Yeah, creating understanding, and also like I was talking to Sam, one of our friends, a mutual friend of ours, about this clip. And one of the things that I said was, I actually think that quite an important part of education and science education in general is being able to overcome, like realizing what you were taught before was an oversimplification and overcoming that. And they just miss all of that, right? Because they basically think that, like I said, everything that's taught to fifth graders or whatever is foundational knowledge that's just like can't ever be revised or rethought or like more, complicated or anything like that.
Yeah, and you might think like being, I guess, like most charitable, you might think that what they're saying is not that the scientific facts are foundational, right? So your example of like the sort of way that you learn about the atom through different levels of education, that's not foundational. But what they're really saying is like scientific practice. Like you're taught like the practice is foundational, and then as you get older, you might get taught kind of ways in which you can specialize that foundational approach to suit certain things. But there's also just not true. I had a very quick aside that just kind of came to me then. So we were saying before about how like it's weird that they didn't interpret your if-then statement as a cause and effect supposition, and then they go on to actually kind of say that. Like they do actually
they do
say,
it for me, right? They go that if the object goes behind the sun, then it will bend the light.
And he says
exactly what I said.
Well, no, but they also say that it causes it and stuff like that, right? So that they get that. So I wondered, and I don't know whether this is like a kind of like conscious decision or anything, but I wonder whether the problem that they have with that as an example is that the observation wasn't the observation of the phenomena of the lensing wasn't made before the postulates were created. But it just goes to show that for everyone who wants to accept that Einstein's theories are real science, then already it can't be the case that all science follows this step by step.
There's something more complicated going on in real science, right? No, quite right. And I guess it's an important point that the conversation we're having now, I suppose, isn't really supposed to be converting. It's not something that not supposed to be like this is the kind of thing these guys who I'm talking to could listen to and then we change their minds. I mean, that's not really the point, I suppose, right?
I mean, it would be cool if it happened.
Well, it would be nice. But yeah, the point really is that for people who are already kind of okay with the idea that Einstein was not a hack, there's good reason to think here that they're vastly oversimplifying the way that science works. Now, they also call me a science denier, which I thought I'd address really quickly, which is that, I think when people, does anyone really define what science denier is? I don't know. But when I hear someone claim, you're a science denier, what I hear is, you are someone, I would call someone who's a science denier, I would say is someone who is just like completely unwilling to accept like scientific consensus and well-established facts about science and things like that. But as in, facts about the natural world. It's like someone who's like, atoms don't exist. I don't believe in them. No one's ever observed them. They don't, like the theory is just completely wrong. That's a science denier. Although I suppose there's a complication here because there is such a thing in philosophy as scientific anti-realism, right? Yeah. So there are some. So that's maybe what I say is not quite right. There are some philosophers out there who would say things like that atoms don't necessarily exist. Yeah. But the important thing is that they wouldn't be denying the empirical evidence, right, for atoms. But these guys are denying all sorts of empirical evidence. Yeah. Now, I'm not denying any kind of empirical evidence of anything. I just think that I have a more complicated conception of the scientific method to these guys, right?
Of scientific practice.
Exactly. And I still think that science delivers knowledge about the natural world. Yeah.
It just does so in a more complicated way than following one
step-by-step thing. Yeah, precisely.
And going back to what you were saying about the sort of scientific like realism versus anti-realism stuff. Even the scientific anti-realist is in agreement with the consensus
about the empirical matters.
Yeah.
So maybe really quickly explain what this debate is. It's quite an old debate. Well, it's a very old debate now about whether or not science is just in the game of giving us kind of predictive power about things we can kind of observe quite directly, such as with our like senses. Or that what that means to observe directly is kind of up for grabs, right? Yeah. But in broad strokes, that's what it's about. And then the scientific realists are going to say something like, not only can we get a handle on what's observable, right, directly observable, but that gives us good reason to believe in things that we can't actually observe directly, at least, like atoms or like fundamental particles or germs or something like that, right? So what I mean to say is that an anti-realist, someone who has that kind of philosophical disposition, I don't think is a science denier because, as we just said, they are willing to accept the empirical matters. They generally think that science is in the business of giving you correct predictions about empirical stuff. These guys deny all the empirical stuff. I don't, right?
Yeah, so the point being is that they're denying the truth of these kind of scientific claims, but they're still agreeing that those claims are useful and they're empirically adequate.
The scientific anti-realist.
Yeah, not the science denier. And so, but that's precisely what separates them, right?
Yes,
because the science denier,
they're not even. It's not even useful, right? It's just all bollocks. Is what they say.
It's false and not useful or adequate or whatever.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah.
But you're the science denier because
apparently,
because you don't follow high school scientific method.
Yeah,
practices.
apparently so. I do deny that. I deny that. That's for sure.
And I don't know if this is going to be something that that they keep. I think it is something that they keep repeating.
They keep calling me a science denier.
No. The thing I'm about to go on to say.
Yeah.
But they keep saying, okay, so you're denying that this is the scientific method.
Yeah.
Give me another one.
Yeah. Right. They've misunderstood my claim.
Yeah. And it was frustrating to listen to it because it's almost like they didn't understand that the point you were making was that you can't just give a list, right? Because if you thought there were many like scientific methods and that they were all kind of equal or whatever.
Yeah, there's
right?
like 5 methods or something.
Let's say 5. Yeah, there's 5 of them. Then the scientific method that you're denying the existence of would just be all of those with disjunctions between them, right?
Yeah, added together.
It'd be this method or this method or this method or this method or this method. If you did one of those 5s, then you're practicing the scientific method. You're precisely saying there isn't the scientific method. It can't be so simply defined. And it's just frustrating because they keep making this claim and they just don't understand. You keep trying to say to them like, I can't give you just another one to be able to do
as
what you're asking me.
To
do what you're asking me to do would be to refute my own point.
They don't get the idea that science. I mean, we'll go on to see the examples that they bring up and stuff, but they just don't understand what, for quite a long time at the very least, don't understand what the conclusion is that I'm trying to kind of argue for.
Yeah, because they just think that if you're denying that science is following this kind of step by step, make an observation, make a hypothesis,
there's got to be another one, right? Yeah,
there's got to be another one, and if you're not following some kind of regimented list of rules like that, then it's just pseudoscience.
Well, there's one other thing to say here, which is that to their credit, it's not just in 5th grade like science education resources that you find this kind of stepwise method thing, right? But normally it is in early science education and maybe high school science education, stuff like that. Which to be honest, I would still count as early science education because you're not engaging in any kind of actual research and practice at that point, and still through undergraduate you're not really, right? But when you eventually get to the point of doing your practice or learning about the scientific method historically or in the philosophy of science, right? Because as you might have guessed, because of the fact that we're talking about it so much, this question of what the scientific method is, if there is one, right, is a question that philosophers of science and historians of science have puzzled over for quite a long time. And especially this question of what separates science from pseudoscience. And then when you start looking at that in much more detail, then you start getting the more complicated view of what science is like, right? And I think this is an unfortunate flaw with science education, which is that people who go and study science themselves. So, I mean, most of my undergraduate and master's was in physics. You don't get taught anything about the scientific method or scientific methods or anything like that, right? And so if you have been taught things about the scientific method, about this kind of stepwise idea of what the scientific method is that these guys are talking about, if you've been taught about that in high school or in earlier education, or you've even just absorbed it from kind of like through like cultural osmosis, right? Yeah, like popular science books or popular science like documentaries, which often will talk about the scientific method in this way, then you're left with that conception of the scientific method and it never really gets corrected later on. So that's really what I'm going to be kind of arguing for, and I suppose what we, in this debate, and what we're going to be talking about in kind of future parts, right? Or when we talk about later bits of the discussion, because they bring up sources. They eventually start citing sources, right? Yeah. And some of these sources are kind of is clearly intended for like a popular audience, or like I say, like, you know, science students. Some of them are actually like much more academic-y type sources, and as we'll see, they end up actually confirming the things that I'm saying because they haven't read their own sources. Yeah. So that's going to be the kind of those are the main points that we're going to be kind of talking about in the future parts.
Yeah, so yeah, the discussion started with the Einstein stuff. Through discussing that, reached a point of realizing that there was an assumption being made here that Einstein's theories don't count as real science because they don't follow this method. And that's where that kind of misunderstanding, I guess, right at the start was, because you weren't expecting them to have that kind of really narrow view of science going in. And so it was an interesting, just like for us, it was interesting for this to be revealed that in these discussions, so often they get so many things about the scientific facts wrong. Yeah. And science communicators are pretty good at revealing those facts that they get that they're wrong about and saying, no, you're wrong about these facts. This is the case. But even science communicators don't pause and go, wait a minute, why don't you think this is real science? Because it doesn't follow this method. That's not what science is, which is fair enough because it's not in their remit to do. But yeah, as will become apparent in the coming episodes, the discussion's really going to just get more abstract, less to do with specific scientific examples, and much more just to do with what is science.
Thank you for listening to The World As It Becomes. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, and Blue Sky at PWAIB_podcast. Although for Blue Sky, that's a hyphen rather than an underscore. And you can also email us at theworldasitbecomes@gmail.com. The World As It Becomes, all one word.
Thank you.